The dust cloud appeared on the horizon just as Kade Dawson finished mending the fence line on his small ranch outside Tucson, Arizona territory, in the spring of 1878. And something about the way that wagon moved, slow and deliberate like a wounded animal limping toward water, made him stop his work and watch. He had been alone for 3 years now, ever since his father passed from pneumonia and left him this 100 acres of scrubland and dreams. At 26 years old, Kade had resigned himself to a life of solitude, working cattle for the larger ranches nearby, and keeping his own small herd going through the brutal desert summers and surprisingly cold winters. The loneliness had become a familiar companion, one he neither welcomed nor fought against anymore. The wagon drew closer and Kade could make out details now. A single horse pulled it, ribs showing even from this distance. The driver wore a bonnet, which meant a woman, and that was unusual enough. Women rarely traveled alone out here. As the wagon turned toward his property, bumping along the rutted road that led to his small adobe house, Kade set down his tools and walked to meet it. The woman pulled the horse to a stop about 20 feet from where he stood. She was young, maybe 23 or 24, with dark hair pulled back severe under that bonnet and eyes that held more exhaustion than any person her age should carry. Her dress was dusty and worn, patched in several places with fabric that did not quite match. Behind her in the wagon bed, 2 small boys sat close together, maybe 5 and 7 years old, watching him with the kind of wariness that spoke of hard lessons learned. "Good afternoon, madam," Kade said, removing his hat. "Can I help you with something?" The woman's hands gripped the reins tightly. "Are you Kade Dawson?" "I am. My name is Tessa Zimmerman. I was told in town that you might have work, that you needed help with your ranch." Her voice was steady, but Kade could hear the desperation underneath it, like a current running beneath ice. Kade frowned. He had mentioned to the general store owner last week that he could use an extra hand come roundup time, but he had been thinking of hiring a ranch hand, not a woman with 2 children. "Madam, I think there might be some confusion. The work here is hard." "It's cattle work, mending fences, breaking horses sometimes. I do not think I can work hard," Tessa interrupted, then seemed to catch herself. "Please. I can cook, I can clean, I can help with animals. My boys are good, they will not be trouble. We just need a place to stay and some wages." "We will not ask for much." The older boy, the one who looked about 7, moved closer to his mother. His face was thin, and his clothes hung on him like they had been made for someone larger. The younger one kept his thumb in his mouth, watching Kade with round eyes. Kade looked at the 3 of them and felt something shift in his chest, some wall he had built carefully over years of solitude beginning to crack. He was not the kind of man who turned away people in need, even if it complicated his life. His mother had raised him better than that before she passed when he was just a boy. "What happened to your husband, Mrs. Zimmerman?" Kade asked gently. Tessa's jaw tightened. "He died 4 months ago. Fever took him in Santa Fe. We have been traveling since then looking for work. My family is back east, but I do not have money for passage, and I will not arrive as a beggar asking for charity. I need to work. Madam, with all respect, I can pay maybe $20 a month, and that is stretching what I can afford. The house is small. There is just 2 rooms. I will sleep in the barn with my boys if needed. $20 is fine. Please, Mr. Dawson. We have been on the road for 3 weeks now. The boys need stability. They need regular meals." Her voice cracked just slightly on the last sentence, and she looked away, blinking hard. Kade stood there in the afternoon sun, dust settling around them, and made a decision that would change everything. "You can have the bedroom. I will take the other room. It has a cot. That horse of yours needs food and rest. Let me help you down." The relief that flooded Tessa's face was so profound it was almost painful to witness. "Thank you. Thank you so much." As Kade helped her down from the wagon, he noticed how light she was, how thin her wrist felt under his hand. These people were hungry, truly hungry, and something in him responded to that need with a protectiveness he had not felt in a long time. The boys climbed down on their own, the older one helping the younger. Up close, Kade could see they had their mother's dark hair and delicate features. The older boy stuck out his hand like a man. "I am Thomas, sir. This is my brother Jack. We will work hard too. We will earn our keep." The formal way the child spoke, the weight of responsibility in his young voice made Kade's heart ache. "Nice to meet you, Thomas. And you, Jack." "How old are you boys?" "I am 7 and Jack is 5, Thomas said. "I can feed chickens and gather eggs. Jack is learning." "That is good to know," Kade said seriously, shaking Thomas's hand with the same gravity he would show a grown man. "Let me show you all inside and then we will get you some food. You must be hungry." "We ate yesterday," Jack piped up, and Thomas shot him a look that said he had revealed too much. Yesterday. They had last eaten yesterday. Kade felt anger rise in him, not at them but at the circumstances that had brought a young widow and her children to this desperate state. The Zimmerman name was unfamiliar, but their story was not. The West was full of widows and orphans, people displaced by death and disaster, all trying to survive in a land that showed no mercy to the weak. Inside the adobe house, Kade directed Tessa to the bedroom, which held a simple bed frame with a rope mattress and a chest of drawers that had belonged to his mother. "I will get fresh bedding from the trunk. This room has not been used in a while." "It is perfect," Tessa said, and she meant it. After weeks of sleeping in the wagon or on the ground, any room with walls and a door must have seemed like luxury. Kade went to the kitchen area, which was really just one corner of the main room with a wood stove and a table. He had beans already cooked, some bacon, and bread he had bought in town 2 days ago. He set about heating the beans and frying the bacon, aware of 3 sets of eyes watching his every move. "How long have you had this ranch, Mr. Dawson?" Tessa asked, standing somewhat awkwardly in the center of the room like she did not know what to do with herself. "My father built it about 15 years ago. He passed 3 years back, left it to me. It is not much, but it is mine free and clear. I run about 50 head of cattle, some horses. I do contract work for the bigger ranches around here when I need extra money." He glanced at her. "You can sit, Mrs. Zimmerman, and the boys too. No need to stand on ceremony here." They sat at the table, all 3 of them with that same careful posture, like they were guests who might be asked to leave at any moment. Kade served them generous portions, far more than he gave himself, and watched as they ate. Tessa tried to maintain some dignity, eating slowly, but the boys wolfed their food down like they were afraid it might disappear. "There is more if you want it," Kade said quietly. "Please, eat your fill." Thomas looked at his mother for permission before accepting a second helping. Jack fell asleep right there at the table, his head dropping forward until Tessa caught him and lifted him into her arms. "He can sleep on the bed," Kade said. "All of you should rest. We can talk about the work tomorrow." "Mr. Dawson, I want to be clear about expectations," Tessa said, even as she held her sleeping child. "I will work hard for you. I will keep the house, cook the meals, help with whatever you need. But I need you to understand that my boys and we are a family. We stay together." "And I am not," she paused, choosing her words carefully. "I am a respectable woman. I hope you are a respectable man." Kade met her eyes steadily. "Mrs. Zimmerman, I asked you here to work because you needed help and I can provide it. Nothing more. You will be safe here, all of you. I give you my word." Something in Tessa's rigid posture relaxed slightly. "Thank you, I apologize if I offended you. I have learned to be cautious." "No apology needed. You are being a good mother, that is all." He stood and moved toward the door. "I will be outside tending to your horse and getting some work done before dark. Rest as long as you need." Outside, Kade unhitched the worn-out horse and led it to his small barn. The animal was in poor condition but would recover with proper feed and care. He gave it grain and fresh water, more than was probably wise for a horse in such condition all at once, but he could not help himself. The Zimmerman's wagon held pitifully few possessions. A trunk with clothes, some cooking utensils, a few books, and a small wooden box that likely held whatever mementos Tessa had of her husband. As Kade worked through the evening, checking on his own horses and the cattle in the near pasture, he kept thinking about the family now sleeping in his house. He had not realized how quiet his life had become until suddenly there were voices and footsteps to fill the silence. The responsibility of it was sobering. They were depending on him now, whether he had planned for it or not. The sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple when Tessa emerged from the house. She had changed into a slightly less worn dress and had tidied her hair. In the softer light, Kade could see that she was actually quite pretty, despite the exhaustion etched into her features. "The boys are still sleeping," she said. "I thought I should start earning my keep. What needs doing for supper?" "I usually just fix something simple. Beans, bacon, cornbread if I have the energy for it." "I can make cornbread," Tessa said. "Do you have cornmeal in the pantry, such as it is?" Kade gestured back toward the house. "Mrs. Zimmerman, you just arrived. You should rest tonight." I rested. "And please call me Tessa, Mrs. Zimmerman makes me feel like I am being scolded." She offered a small smile, the first he had seen from her. It transformed her face, made her look younger and less burdened. "Tessa, then, and you should call me Kade. Mr. Dawson was my father." They walked back to the house together, and Kade tried to see it through her eyes. It was small and rough, but it was solid and clean. He had never been much for decorating, so the walls were bare except for one shelf that held his father's old books and his mother's Bible. The furniture was simple but well made. His father had been a carpenter before becoming a rancher, and that skill showed in the sturdy table and chairs, the carefully fitted door frames. Tessa moved around the kitchen area with an efficiency that spoke of years of practice. She found the cornmeal, the baking soda, the buttermilk he had gotten from a neighbor. As she worked, Kade sat at the table mending a bridle that had needed fixing for weeks. They did not talk much, but the silence was comfortable, broken only by the sounds of cooking and the soft snores of the boys from the bedroom. "How long were you married?" Kade asked after a while, then worried he had overstepped. "I am sorry, that is none of my business." "It is fine." 8 years. We married when I was 16. Robert was a good man, a clerk in Santa Fe. He had a steady position, nothing grand but enough to support us. Then the fever came through last winter, and he was gone in 4 days. Tessa's hands kept moving as she spoke, mixing the cornbread batter with practiced efficiency. "The man who owned the store where Robert worked, he was kind enough to let us stay in the rooms above the shop for a month, but then he needed them for the new clerk. I tried to find work in Santa Fe, but no one wants to hire a woman with 2 small children. They think you will be unreliable, always needing time off when the children are sick. That must have been difficult. Difficult is waking up next to your husband and finding him cold. Everything after that is just survival." She said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity, but Kade heard the pain underneath. "I had some money saved, enough for the wagon and horse and supplies to travel. A woman in Santa Fe told me that Arizona Territory had opportunities, that the towns were growing and needed people, so we came west. Tucson is growing, that is true. The railroad will be here soon, they say. That will change everything. Change can be good. Tessa poured the batter into a cast iron skillet and placed it in the oven of the wood stove. Or so I keep telling myself. When the cornbread was ready, Tessa woke the boys gently. They ate together around the small table, 4 people in a space that had held only one for so long. Thomas asked Kade careful questions about the ranch, about the cattle and horses, with the earnest curiosity of a child trying to understand his new world. Jack was quieter, still waking up, but he watched Kade intently. After supper, as the last light faded from the sky, Kade showed them how to bank the fire in the stove for the night. It gets cold in the desert after dark, even in spring. Keep this going low and it will warm the whole house. In Santa Fe, we had a fireplace, Jack said suddenly. Papa would tell us stories before bed. An awkward silence fell. Thomas looked down at his plate. Tessa's hand moved to touch Jack's shoulder, but Kade spoke before she could. My father told me stories too. He knew a lot of them. Stories about the old days, about cowboys and cattle drives. I probably remember some of them if you ever want to hear one. Jack's face brightened. Really? Sure. Maybe tomorrow night after we get some work done. The gratitude in Tessa's eyes was almost overwhelming. That is very kind of you, Kade. It is no trouble, and he meant it. Already, after just a few hours, the house felt different, more alive. Less like a place he was merely existing and more like an actual home. That night, lying on the cot in the small second room that had been his father's office and sick room at the end, Kade listened to the quiet sounds of the Zimmermans settling into the bedroom. Tessa's low voice as she talked to the boys, the creak of the bed ropes as they climbed in, the eventual silence as they all fell asleep. For the first time in 3 years, Kade did not feel quite so alone in the world. Morning came early on a ranch. Kade was up before dawn, as usual, starting the fire and putting coffee on to boil. He was surprised when Tessa emerged from the bedroom fully dressed just as the sky was beginning to lighten. You do not have to get up this early, Kade said. If I am going to cook breakfast, I should be up when you are. She moved to the stove, taking over without asking. What do you usually eat? Whatever is quick. Fried eggs if the chickens are laying. Bacon. More coffee than is probably good for me. I will make a proper breakfast. You will need your strength for the day's work. She said it with a firmness that suggested she would not be argued with, so Kade did not try. Instead, he went outside to begin the morning chores. The air was cool and fresh, the sun just starting to paint the sky pink and gold. His cattle were visible in the near pasture, already moving around and grazing. He checked the water trough, made sure the level was good, then went to the barn to feed his horses. Thomas appeared at his elbow, making Kade jump. The boy moved quietly as a cat. Can I help, sir? You can call me Kade, and yes, you can help. You ever been around horses? No, sir, I mean Kade. We always lived in town. Well then, first rule is move slow and talk soft. Horses are big, but they scare easy. Come here, I will show you. Kade demonstrated how to approach a horse, how to let it sniff your hand before touching it. Thomas watched with intense concentration, absorbing every word. This here is Dakota, Kade said, running his hand down the nose of his best saddle horse, a sturdy bay gelding. He is my main riding horse. And that paint over there is Cisco. The mare in the far stall is Penny, and she is expecting a foal in a few weeks. That is why she is in the barn instead of out in the pasture. A baby horse. Thomas's eyes went wide. Can I see when it is born? If the timing works out, sure. Mares usually foal at night though, so no promises. Kade handed Thomas a brush. You can help me groom Dakota. Just brush in the direction the hair grows, nice and easy strokes. They worked together in companionable silence, broken only by Kade's occasional instruction. Thomas was careful and thorough, and Dakota stood patiently for the attention. After the horses were fed and groomed, Kade showed Thomas the chicken coop, where 4 hens and a rooster lived. Your job, if you are willing, can be collecting eggs every morning and making sure these ladies have food and water. Think you can handle that? Thomas nodded vigorously. Yes, I can do that. Good man. Kade clapped him on the shoulder and Thomas stood a little taller. Back in the house, Tessa had transformed the simple ingredients into a feast. Fresh eggs fried perfectly, bacon crispy, and something that smelled like cinnamon. I found some dried apples in your pantry, Tessa said, almost apologetically. I hope you do not mind, I made fried apple cakes. Kade sat down at the table, where Jack was already eating with enthusiasm. Mind, this looks better than anything I have cooked in 3 years. The meal was delicious, and Kade found himself eating more than he usually did in the mornings. Tessa packed food away with the care of someone who had known scarcity, wrapping the leftover bacon in cloth and storing it carefully. After breakfast, Kade outlined his plan for the day. I need to ride out and check on the cattle, make sure none have wandered too far or gotten into trouble. There is a water source about 3 miles east that they favor. It will take most of the morning. What would you like me to do while you are gone? Tessa asked. Whatever you think needs doing. The house is yours to organize as you see fit. There is a vegetable garden plot behind the house, but I have not planted anything yet this year. If you know about gardening, the seeds are in a tin in the pantry. I can do that. I kept a garden in Santa Fe. Tessa looked around the main room. And this place could use a thorough cleaning if you do not mind me saying so. No offense taken. I am not much for housekeeping. Kade stood and gathered his riding gear. I should be back by early afternoon. If you need anything or if there is any trouble, fire 3 shots from the rifle over the door. I will hear it and come back. Tessa paled slightly. Do you expect trouble? No, but it is always good to be prepared. This is wild country still. We get the occasional drifter. Sometimes Indians passing through, though the Apache have been quiet lately. Just knowing how to signal for help is good practice. He left her looking somewhat worried, which he regretted, but it was important that she understood where they were. This was not a safe, settled town. This was the edge of civilization where anything could happen. The ride out to check the cattle was peaceful. Dakota was fresh and eager, and the morning was beautiful in that way only the desert could be. Kade found his small herd scattered but content, grazing on the sparse grass near a seasonal creek that still held water from the winter rains. He counted heads, checked for any signs of illness or injury, and found everything in order. On the ride back, he thought about the changes in his life. Yesterday morning, he had been alone. Today, he had 3 people depending on him. It was strange how quickly circumstances could shift. Tessa clearly needed this situation as much as he needed help, but Kade was already aware that it was more complicated than just an employment arrangement. She was a young woman and he was a young man, and they would be living in close quarters. People in town would talk. There would be assumptions and gossip. But when Kade rode back into the yard just after noon and saw the laundry hanging on a line he had not even known he owned, saw the windows of his house actually clean and sparkling in the sun, saw Thomas carefully watering a freshly planted garden while Jack played with some sticks in the dirt, something in him settled. This was right. Whatever complications might come, this felt more right than anything had in a long time. Tessa came out to meet him, wiping her hands on an apron. How were the cattle? All fine. You have been busy. He gestured at the transformation around the house. I found the cleaning supplies in the barn, and those windows were so dirty I do not think you could see out of them properly. She smiled, and again Kade was struck by how different she looked when she smiled. I also found your laundry situation. When was the last time you washed those clothes? I usually do it every couple weeks. Those shirts looked like they had not been washed in a month. It might have been a month, Kade admitted. I lose track sometimes. Tessa shook her head, but she was still smiling. Well, you have help now. Go get cleaned up. Lunch will be ready soon. The days began to take on a rhythm. Kade would rise early, and Tessa would already be up making coffee and preparing breakfast. Thomas would help Kade with the morning chores, eager to learn everything about ranch life. Jack was still too young for much real work, but he would tag along sometimes, or stay with his mother learning whatever she was teaching him. Tessa transformed the house. She cleaned and organized, planted a garden that quickly began to show green shoots, and cooked meals that made Kade wonder how he had survived on his own cooking for so long. But more than the practical help, she brought life to the place. She sang sometimes while she worked, old songs that Kade half remembered from his childhood. She put wildflowers in a jar on the table. She opened the windows to let in fresh air and sunlight. Thomas proved to be a quick learner and a hard worker. Within a week, he was handling the chicken duties completely on his own and begging to learn more. Kade taught him how to rope a fence post, how to saddle a horse, how to read the weather by watching the sky and the way the cattle behaved. Jack was quieter, more reserved. He clung to his mother often, and sometimes Kade would catch him staring off into the distance with a sadness that was painful to see in such a young child. One evening, about 10 days after the Zimmermans arrived, Kade made good on his promise to tell stories. After supper, with the dishes cleared and the fire burning low, Kade had the boys sit with him while Tessa mended clothes nearby. My father used to tell me about the cattle drives he went on when he was young, before he settled here. They would drive hundreds of head of cattle north to the railroads in Kansas. It would take months, and all sorts of things could happen. He told them about stampedes and river crossings, about Indians and outlaws, about nights sleeping under the stars and days so hot the men would tie wet cloths around their necks just to keep from overheating. Thomas was enthralled, asking questions and wanting every detail. Jack listened quietly, but Kade noticed he was engaged, his eyes focused and alert. When the story was done, Jack spoke up for the first time that evening. Did your papa ever get scared? I am sure he did. Being scared is not a bad thing. It is what you do when you are scared that matters. I get scared sometimes, Jack said quietly. At night I dream that Mama is going to go away like Papa did. Tessa set down her mending, her face stricken. Oh, sweetheart, I am not going anywhere, you promise. I promise. But Jack did not look entirely convinced, and Kade understood. The boy had learned that the world was not safe, that the people you loved could disappear. No amount of promising could completely erase that fear. Jack, your mama is strong and healthy, Kade said gently. And she has help now. We are all looking out for each other here. That is what families do. He had not meant to use the word family, it just came out, but nobody corrected him. Tessa looked at him with an expression he could not quite read, something between gratitude and something deeper, more complex. That night, lying on his cot, Kade thought about what he had said. Were they becoming a family? Was that what this feeling was, this sense of rightness and belonging? He had not been looking for this. He had been content, or so he told himself, with his solitary life. But now that he had tasted something different, he could not imagine going back. 3 weeks passed. The garden grew. Thomas became confident enough with the horses that Kade let him ride Cisco around the yard, carefully supervised. Jack began to open up more, talking and even laughing sometimes. The sound of a child's laughter in the house was something Kade had not realized he was missing until he heard it. Tessa continued to be efficient and capable, but Kade noticed other things too. The way she tucked a stray hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. The way she hummed while cooking. The way her whole face softened when she looked at her sons. He found himself watching her more than was probably appropriate, found himself looking forward to meals not just for the food but for the conversation and her presence. One Saturday, Kade suggested they all go into Tucson for supplies. "You have been here nearly a month and have not left the ranch once. The boys might enjoy seeing the town." Tessa hesitated. "I do not want to impose, and I do not have money for. You have been working hard. You have earned wages. Besides, there are things we need, and it will be easier with help carrying everything." He did not mention that he mostly just wanted to give them an outing, a chance to see something beyond the ranch. They loaded into Kade's wagon, which was in much better condition than the one Tessa had arrived in. The boys were excited, pointing at everything they saw along the road. Tucson was growing rapidly, with new buildings going up and streets that were busy with people and commerce. Kade took them to the general store first, where he needed to stock up on staples. Tessa moved through the aisles with a practiced eye, suggesting things he had not thought of, and finding better prices on items he usually just grabbed without thinking. The store owner, Mr. Patterson, raised his eyebrows when he saw Kade with a woman and children, but was polite enough not to comment. "Mr. Dawson, I heard you had hired some help," was all he said. "Yes, this is Mrs. Zimmerman and her sons. They have been a great asset to the ranch." Kade kept his tone neutral but firm, establishing clearly that Tessa was an employee and under his protection. After the general store, they went to the feed store for grain and then to the butcher for meat. Thomas and Jack pressed their noses against the window of the candy shop, and Kade could not resist. "You boys ever had peppermint sticks?" Their eyes went wide and they both shook their heads. Kade bought 4 peppermint sticks, one for each boy and one each for Tessa and himself. The joy on those children's faces over something so simple made Kade's chest feel tight. They were loading the supplies into the wagon when a woman approached. She was older, maybe 50, well dressed in a way that spoke of money and social position. "Kade Dawson, is that you, Mrs. Fletcher? Good to see you." Kade tipped his hat. Mrs. Fletcher owned one of the larger ranches north of town with her husband. "I heard you had taken in a widow and her children. How charitable of you." Her tone suggested she thought it was anything but charitable. Her eyes raked over Tessa with obvious judgment. "Of course, people are talking. A young man and a young woman living together unmarried. It is rather scandalous." Kade felt anger rise in him, hot and immediate. "Mrs. Zimmerman is my employee. She keeps my house and I pay her wages. There is nothing scandalous about honest work. Of course, I am sure it is all very proper." Mrs. Fletcher's tone said she thought nothing of the sort. "Still, you know how people talk. It might be wise to consider the appearances." After she left, Tessa was quiet, her face flushed with embarrassment. The boys, sensing the tension, stayed close to her. Kade loaded the last of the supplies with more force than necessary, angry at Mrs. Fletcher and angry at himself for not anticipating this. Of course people would gossip. This was a small community where everyone knew everyone's business. On the ride back to the ranch, Tessa finally spoke. "Perhaps it would be better if the boys and I moved into the barn. Or maybe there is somewhere in town we could." "No," Kade said firmly. "You are not moving into the barn and you are not moving to town. Mrs. Fletcher is a busybody who has nothing better to do than judge other people. Anyone who actually knows us knows this is a respectable arrangement. But if people are talking, it could hurt your reputation. People might not want to do business with you. Then they can take their business elsewhere. I am not going to let small-minded gossip dictate how I live my life or who I help. He glanced at her. Unless you want to leave. If you are uncomfortable staying, I will understand and I will help you find something else. But do not leave because of people like Mrs. Fletcher. Tessa was quiet for a moment. I do not want to leave. The boys are happy here. I am happy here. But I also do not want to cause problems for you. You are not causing problems. You are solving them. Before you came, this ranch was barely holding together. Now I have clean clothes and regular meals and help with the work. The only problem is people who cannot mind their own business. Thomas, who had been listening from the back of the wagon, spoke up. That lady was mean. I did not like her. Sometimes people are mean when they do not understand something, Tessa said, ever the mother trying to teach a lesson. We just have to be patient with them. Or we can ignore them and go about our lives, Kade muttered, and was rewarded with a small smile from Tessa. But that evening, after the boys were in bed, Tessa brought it up again. Kade was outside checking on Penny, the pregnant mare, when Tessa came to the barn. I have been thinking about what Mrs. Fletcher said, she began. Please do not. She is not worth thinking about. But she is right about one thing, people will talk. And in a small community like this, reputation matters. It matters for business, for your standing. I do not want my presence here to hurt you. Kade turned to face her fully. The lantern light cast shadows across her face, making her look even more tired than usual. Tessa, I am going to ask you a question and I want you to answer honestly. Are you happy here? She nodded. Yes. Happier than I have been since Robert died. The boys are happy too. Thomas talks about this ranch like it is the most wonderful place in the world. And Jack, he is starting to smile again. That means everything to me. Then that is all that matters. I am happy too. Happier than I have been in the 3 years since my father died. You have brought life back to this place. So unless you want to leave, unless you are unhappy or uncomfortable, I do not care what Mrs. Fletcher or anyone else thinks. Tessa looked at him for a long moment. You are a good man, Kade Dawson. I am just a man trying to do right, same as most people. He went back to checking the mare, but he could feel Tessa still standing there. Can I ask you something? She said. Of course. Why have you never married? You are young. You have a ranch. You are kind and hardworking. I would think women would be interested. Kade laughed quietly. There are not a lot of women out here to begin with. Most of the ones who are here are already married or are looking for men with more money and better prospects. I am just a small rancher trying to make a living. That is not very appealing to most. I find that hard to believe. He glanced at her. What about you? Do you ever think about marrying again? Tessa was quiet for so long he thought she would not answer. I loved Robert. He was good to me, good to the boys. But if I am being completely honest, it was more of a comfortable partnership than a grand passion. My father arranged our marriage. Robert was stable and respectable, and I was 16 and did not know any better than to agree. We grew to care for each other, but I sometimes wonder what it would be like to choose for yourself, to feel something more than just contentment. It was the most personal thing she had shared with him, and Kade felt the weight of that trust. You are still young. You will have that chance again if you want it, maybe, she smiled sadly. Good night, Kade. Good night, Tessa. After she left, Kade stood in the barn for a long time thinking about their conversation. He had felt that spark of something more than just employer and employee for weeks now, but he had pushed it aside, telling himself it was inappropriate and premature. Tessa was a widow, vulnerable and dependent on him for survival. Any romantic feelings he might have would be taking advantage of that vulnerability. But what if it was not just him? What if she felt something too? Kade shook his head, trying to clear it. It was too soon. She had only been widowed 4 months. She needed stability and security, not a confused rancher who was developing feelings he had no business developing. The next few weeks, Kade tried to maintain a proper distance. He was polite and respectful, but he stopped lingering over meals and limited their conversations to practical matters. If Tessa noticed the change, she did not mention it, though sometimes he caught her looking at him with a puzzled expression. Then Penny went into labor. It was late at night, nearly midnight, when Kade woke to the sound of a horse in distress. He pulled on his boots and ran to the barn, where Penny was lying in her stall, clearly struggling. He had been through horse births before, and he could see immediately that something was wrong. The foal was positioned badly. Kade worked quickly, trying to help reposition the foal, but Penny was panicking and he could not do it alone. He needed help, and he needed it now. He ran to the house and knocked on the bedroom door. "Tessa, I need your help. The mare is foaling and there is a problem." Tessa emerged almost immediately, pulling a shawl over her nightgown. "What do you need me to do?" "I need you to hold the mare's head, keep her calm while I try to help the foal. Can you do that?" "Yes." They ran together to the barn. Tessa knelt at Penny's head, murmuring soft words and stroking the mare's neck while Kade worked. It was hard, delicate work, and he was sweating despite the cool night air. Finally, he felt the foal shift into the right position. "Okay, this is good. Just keep her calm a little longer." 20 minutes later, a wet, gangly foal was lying in the straw, alive and already trying to figure out how its legs worked. Penny was exhausted but fine, nosing her baby with gentle concern. Kade sat back, his arms and shirt covered in blood and birth fluids. "We did it." Tessa was grinning, her face flushed with excitement and relief. "I have never seen anything like that. It was incredible." "It never gets old," Kade admitted. "Every birth feels like a miracle." They watched the foal for a few more minutes, making sure it was nursing properly and that Penny was recovering well. Then they walked back to the house together, both too wound up with adrenaline to sleep immediately. "I should clean up," Kade said, gesturing at his ruined shirt. "I will heat some water." Tessa stirred the coals in the stove and added wood, then filled a pot with water to warm. While they waited, they sat at the table in the near darkness, lit only by the glow of the stove. "Thank you for helping," Kade said. "I could not have done that alone." "I am glad I could help. I was so worried when you said something was wrong. You did great. You are good in a crisis." "I have had practice." She said it lightly, but they both knew what she meant. Losing a husband, becoming homeless with 2 children, that was a crisis, and she had handled it. The water heated and Kade poured it into a basin. Tessa handed him a cloth and he cleaned up as best he could, rinsing the blood and fluids from his arms. Without thinking, he pulled off his ruined shirt, then realized he was now shirtless in front of Tessa. "Sorry, I should have." He started to turn away, but Tessa stopped him. "You have a scar." She was looking at his left shoulder, where a long white line ran from his collarbone to his upper arm, from a few years back. "A cow with a new calf took exception to me getting too close. Horned me pretty good. It must have hurt. It did at the time. I barely notice it now." He was very aware of her closeness, of the fact that she was in her nightgown and he was half-dressed and they were alone in the dark. The air felt charged, heavy with something unspoken. Tessa reached out and traced the scar with her finger, light as a feather. The touch sent electricity through Kade's entire body. "You have been hurt and you kept going. I admire that. We all keep going. What else is there? Some people just give up. Not you. You did not give up." "I had the boys. I had to keep going for them." She was still touching his shoulder, her finger now still just resting against his skin. But being here, having help, having someone to share the burden with, it makes it easier. You have given us that. Kade knew he should step back, put distance between them, but he could not make himself move. You have given me something too. This place, it was not a home anymore after my father died. It was just a place I existed. You have made it feel like a home again. They were close enough now that he could feel her breath on his skin. Her eyes were searching his face, and he wondered what she saw there. Whatever it was, it made her lean in closer. The kiss, when it happened, felt inevitable. Soft at first, tentative, both of them testing the waters. Then deeper, more certain. Kade's hand came up to cup her face and Tessa's arms went around his neck, and for a moment the world narrowed to just this, just the two of them and the warmth of connection. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Tessa looked stunned. I should not have done that. We both did it. I am your employee. You have been so good to me and the boys. I should not be. I do not want you to think I am trying to take advantage. Tessa, stop. Kade took her hands in his. I have been feeling this for weeks. I have been trying to ignore it because I thought it was too soon, that it would not be right. But I cannot deny it anymore. I care about you, not as an employee, as a woman, as someone I want in my life. I care about you too, Tessa whispered, but I am scared. I lost Robert so suddenly. What if I let myself feel something and then you are gone too? I cannot promise nothing will ever happen to me. Life is unpredictable. We both know that. But I can promise I will do everything in my power to be here, to take care of you and the boys, for as long as I am able. Tessa wiped at her eyes. This is complicated. It does not have to be. We already live together. We already care about each other. We already work well as a team. Why not just admit there is more to it than that? What will people say? We are already the subject of gossip. They are going to talk no matter what we do. At least this way we will be happy. He squeezed her hands. I am not saying we rush into anything. I am just saying we stop pretending this is only a business arrangement. Tessa smiled through her tears. All right, we will stop pretending. They kissed again, slower this time, savoring it. When they finally said good night and went to their separate rooms, Kade felt like he was floating. The loneliness that had been his constant companion for years was gone, replaced by something bright and hopeful. The next morning, Kade woke to find Thomas standing beside his cot. Kade, can we go see the baby horse? Sure, let me get dressed and we will go check on them. At breakfast, Tessa was quieter than usual, but she kept catching Kade's eye and smiling. The boys were too excited about the new foal to notice any change in the adults, which was probably for the best. Kade and Tessa had not talked about what they would tell Thomas and Jack, or when, after breakfast, they all went to the barn. The foal was standing now, all long legs and big eyes, staying close to its mother. Thomas was entranced. Can I name it? What did you have in mind? Kade asked. Star, because of the white mark on its forehead. Star it is then. Jack wanted to pet the foal, so Kade showed him how to approach slowly, how to let the foal sniff his hand first. Watching Jack's face light up with delight as the foal nuzzled his palm, Kade felt a surge of affection for the boy. For both boys, really. They had worked their way into his heart without him even realizing it. Over the next few weeks, things shifted in subtle ways. Kade and Tessa were more open with their affection when the boys were not around. Stolen kisses in the barn, holding hands while watching the sunset, quiet conversations late at night about their hopes and dreams. But they were careful not to move too fast, aware that there were two young boys to consider. Then one evening, Jack asked a question that changed everything. They were finishing supper when Jack looked at Kade and said, "Are you going to be our new papa?" The table went silent. Thomas looked at his brother with wide eyes, then at Kade with an expression that was hard to read. Tessa seemed frozen, not sure how to respond. Kade set down his fork carefully. "Why do you ask that, Jack?" "Because I see Mama smile at you the way she used to smile at Papa, and you are nice to us like a papa would be, and I heard you and Mama talking last night and it sounded like you like each other." Tessa found her voice. "Jack, Kade is our friend and he has been very kind to us. But that does not mean I would like to be," Kade interrupted quietly. Everyone looked at him. "If that is something you boys would want, and if your mother would want it, I care very much about all three of you." Thomas spoke for the first time. "You mean like a real family?" "Yes, like a real family. But what about our real papa?" Thomas's voice was challenging, defensive. "We already have a papa." "You do," Kade agreed, "and nothing will ever change that. Your papa loved you and your brother very much. I am not trying to replace him. But he is gone, and you need someone to look after you, to teach you things, to be there for you. I would like to be that person if you will let me." Thomas looked down at his plate, his jaw tight. "I need to think about it." He got up from the table and went outside. Tessa started to follow him, but Kade touched her arm. "Let me." He found Thomas sitting on the fence, looking out at the darkening desert. Kade climbed up and sat beside him, not saying anything at first. After a few minutes, Thomas spoke. "I do not remember my papa very well. I try, but it is getting harder. I am scared that if I let you be like a papa, I will forget him completely." Kade's heart ached. "That is not how memory works. Caring about someone new does not erase the people you loved before. Your papa will always be part of you, but he would want you to be happy, to be taken care of. Do not you think, I guess? And I am not trying to make you forget him. We can talk about him whenever you want. You can tell me stories about him and I will listen. He is part of your history, part of who you are. I respect that." Thomas was quiet for a long time. "You really care about us, about me and Jack." "I really do, more than I knew I could. You are both good boys, and I am proud of how hard you work and how much you have learned. And you love Mama." It was a blunt question, but Kade answered it honestly. "Yes, I do." "Are you going to marry her?" "I would like to, if she will have me. But that depends on a lot of things, including whether you and Jack are comfortable with it." Thomas turned to look at him. In the fading light, his face looked older than his years. "Jack is too little to decide. He just wants to be happy and feel safe. But I remember things being hard before we came here. Mama tried to hide it, but I knew. We did not have enough food sometimes. She was scared all the time. Since we came here, she is not scared anymore. You did that. We did that, all of us together. If you marry Mama, will we stay here forever? This will be our home." "Yes, this will be your home for as long as you want it to be." Thomas nodded slowly. "Okay, then it is okay with me. You can marry Mama, and you can be like our papa if you want." The simple acceptance in those words made Kade's eyes sting. "Thank you, Thomas. That means a lot to me." They sat there a while longer, watching the stars come out. Then Thomas said quietly, "My real name is not Thomas. It is Tom. But Papa always called me Thomas because he said it sounded more respectable. I kind of hate it. Would you rather I call you Tom?" "Yes, please." "All right, Tom it is." When they went back inside, Tessa looked between them anxiously. Kade gave her a small nod, and he saw the relief flood her face. Jack was already half asleep at the table, worn out by the emotional evening. That night, after the boys were in bed, Kade and Tessa stood outside under the stars. "What did you say to Tom?" Tessa asked. "Just the truth. That I care about all of you and want to be part of your family if you will have me." He took her hands. "Tessa, I know this is fast by conventional standards. You have only been widowed 5 months. We have only known each other 2 months, but I am sure of my feelings. I love you. I love your sons. I want to marry you to give you and the boys my name and my protection and everything I have. Will you marry me?" Tessa looked up at him with tears shining in her eyes. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." They kissed, and it felt like a promise, like a beginning. They decided to marry quickly and quietly. Neither of them wanted a big celebration, and Kade was conscious of the gossip that was already circulating. Better to present the town with a fait accompli than to drag things out. The next Saturday, they all dressed in their best clothes and went into Tucson. Kade had arranged for the circuit preacher to perform the ceremony. There were no guests except the preacher's wife as a witness. It was simple and brief, but when Kade slipped a simple gold band onto Tessa's finger and the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the weight of it was profound. Tom and Jack stood beside their mother, both dressed in new shirts that Tessa had made for the occasion. After the ceremony, Jack hugged Kade's legs and said, "Now you really are our papa." Kade picked him up. "Now I really am." Tom was more reserved, but he shook Kade's hand solemnly and said, "Thank you for taking care of us. It is my honor." They spent the rest of the day in town, having a celebratory meal at the hotel restaurant and buying a few supplies. Kade noticed people staring, noticed the whispers, but he did not care. Tessa was his wife now. They were a legitimate family, and anyone who had a problem with it could keep their opinions to themselves. Mrs. Fletcher actually approached them on the street. Kade braced himself for judgment, but instead she nodded curtly and said, "Congratulations on your marriage, Mr. Dawson. I hope you will both be very happy." It was not warm, but it was respectful, and Kade would take it. The ride home felt different. They were not just four people living together anymore. They were a family, bound by law and love. When they arrived back at the ranch, Kade carried Tessa over the threshold, making her laugh and the boys cheer. That night, after the boys were asleep, Kade and Tessa moved his belongings into the bedroom they would now share. It felt momentous, this blending of lives and spaces. Tessa had been nervous all evening, and Kade understood why. She had been with only one man before, her late husband, and this was new territory for both of them as a couple. "We do not have to rush anything," Kade said gently. "I am happy just to hold you tonight." "I want to be a proper wife to you," Tessa said. "I am just a little nervous." "That is natural. We have time to learn each other." He pulled her into his arms, and she rested her head on his chest. "I love you, Tessa. Whatever happens between us, whatever we do or do not do tonight or any night, that does not change." They lay together in the darkness, talking quietly about everything and nothing, until eventually Tessa's nervousness eased and they came together as husband and wife, tender and careful with each other afterward, lying tangled together. Tessa said softly, "I never knew it could be like that. With Robert, it was always just a duty, something we did because married people were supposed to. But this, with you, it felt different. It felt like something I wanted, not just something I was obligated to do." Kade kissed her forehead. "It will only get better as we get to know each other more. We have the rest of our lives to figure it out." The months that followed were the happiest of Kade's life. The ranch prospered, with Tessa managing the household and helping with planning, and with Tom taking on more responsibilities. Kade was able to expand his operation. He bought more cattle, improved the pastures, and even began breeding horses in addition to just keeping them for ranch work. Tom thrived under Kade's mentorship. By the time he turned 8, he could ride as well as many adults and was learning to rope. Jack, now 6, was old enough to take on more chores and was eager to prove himself as capable as his older brother. The boys never forgot their father, and Tessa and Kade made sure to honor his memory. Tessa would tell them stories about Robert, keeping him alive in their minds. But gradually, they began to call Kade Pa, and while it felt strange at first, Kade grew to love the sound of it. In the fall, Tessa discovered she was pregnant. The news filled Kade with a joy so profound it was almost frightening. He was going to be a father, not just a stepfather, but a father to a child of his own. Tom and Jack were excited about having a sibling, already making plans for all the things they would teach the baby. The pregnancy was not easy for Tessa. She was often sick in the early months, and Kade found himself taking over more of the household duties, cooking meals and doing laundry with Tom's help. But Tessa never complained. She was happy, glowing despite the discomfort. One evening in December, as they sat by the fire with the boys playing on the floor, Tessa took Kade's hand and placed it on her belly. "Feel that?" He felt a flutter, a tiny movement beneath his palm. Their child, alive and growing. Kade's eyes filled with tears. "That is incredible." "That is our baby," Tessa said, smiling. "Our son or daughter." Spring came, bringing with it new life. The cattle had calves, the garden flourished, and Tessa's belly grew round and full. As her due date approached, Kade found himself anxious. Childbirth was dangerous, and he had already lost too many people he loved. But Tessa was calm, confident in her own body and the process. When the labor started, it was the middle of the night, as these things often were. Kade rode to fetch the midwife from town, pushing Dakota hard. By the time he returned with the older woman, Tessa's contractions were coming regularly. The midwife shooed Kade out of the bedroom, telling him this was women's work. Kade sat with Tom and Jack in the main room, all three of them awake and waiting. The boys were scared, and Kade did his best to reassure them, even though he was terrified himself. Hours passed. The sun rose. The sounds from the bedroom shifted and changed, and then finally, the cry of a baby. The midwife emerged, smiling. "You have a healthy daughter, Mr. Dawson. And your wife is well. You can go in now." A daughter. Kade walked into the bedroom feeling like his legs might not hold him. Tessa was propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle. He sat beside her and looked down at his daughter's face for the first time. She was perfect. Tiny and red and wrinkled, but perfect. "She is beautiful," Kade whispered. "She has your nose," Tessa said, smiling. "What should we name her?" They had discussed names but had not settled on anything. Now, looking at his daughter, Kade thought of his mother, who had died too young and who would have loved to meet her granddaughter. "What about Mary? That was my mother's name." "Mary," Tessa repeated softly. "Mary Dawson, I like it." Tom and Jack were allowed in to meet their sister, both of them awed by the tiny baby. Jack reached out one finger to touch her hand, and Mary's fingers curled around it reflexively. "She is so small," Jack breathed. "You were that small once," Tessa told him. "Was I really?" "Even smaller, actually." The next weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feeding. Mary was a good baby, but she was still a baby with all that entailed. Kade found himself walking the floor at midnight, rocking his daughter and singing the old songs his father had sung to him. Sometimes he would look down at her sleeping face and feel overwhelmed by the responsibility and the love. Tom and Jack were helpful, entertaining the baby when she was awake and doing extra chores to give Tessa time to rest. The whole family pulled together, and somehow they made it work. As Mary grew from a newborn to an infant, as she started to smile and reach for things and babble, Kade marveled at how much his life had changed. 2 years ago, he had been alone. Now he had a wife he loved, 3 children, and a ranch that was finally becoming truly successful. But life was not without its challenges. That summer, a drought hit. The creek dried up, and the cattle had to be driven farther and farther to find water. Kade spent long days in the saddle and came home exhausted. Money was tight, as he had to buy feed to supplement what the cattle could not find grazing. One particularly hard evening, After dealing with a broken fence and losing a cow to a mountain lion, Kade came home frustrated and short-tempered. When Tom accidentally spilled milk at supper, Kade snapped at him. Tom's face crumpled and he ran outside. Kade immediately felt terrible. He started to stand, but Tessa put a hand on his arm. "Let me. You stay with Jack and Mary." She found Tom in the barn, and Kade watched through the window as she talked to him, hugged him, and eventually brought him back inside. Tom's eyes were red from crying, and Kade felt like the worst father in the world. "Tom, I am sorry," Kade said immediately. "I should not have yelled at you. It was an accident, and I was taking my frustration out on you. That was wrong." "It is okay," Tom said quietly. "No, it is not okay. You did not deserve that." Kade pulled the boy into a hug. "I am still learning how to be a father. I make mistakes. But I love you, and I am sorry I made you feel bad." Tom hugged him back tightly. "I love you too, Pa." That night, after the children were asleep, Tessa and Kade talked about the drought and the financial pressure. "We will get through this," Tessa said firmly. "We have each other. We will figure it out." And they did. Kade took on extra work with neighboring ranches. Tessa started selling eggs and vegetables in town. Tom helped more with the cattle, shouldering responsibilities beyond his years. Slowly, they weathered the crisis. The rains came in September, late but welcome. The land greened up, the cattle fattened, and life returned to a more manageable rhythm. Mary was starting to crawl, getting into everything and keeping everyone on their toes. Tom was 9 now, competent and confident on horseback. Jack was 7, and could handle most of the daily chores without supervision. For Thanksgiving that year, they had much to be grateful for. Kade looked around the table at his family, at Tessa serving the meal she had worked all day to prepare, at Tom and Jack arguing good-naturedly about something, at Mary banging her spoon on her high chair, and felt a contentment so complete it was almost painful. "What are you thinking about?" Tessa asked, noticing his expression. "Just how lucky I am. 3 years ago I was alone, now I have all of this, all of you." "We are the lucky ones," Tom said. "You gave us a home when we had nothing." "We gave each other a home," Kade corrected. "That is what family does." Winter came and went. Mary took her first steps. Tom turned 10 and Kade started teaching him to break horses, carefully and safely. Jack announced he wanted to learn to read better, so Tessa started spending an hour each afternoon with him on his lessons. In the spring, Tessa told Kade she was pregnant again. This time, he was less terrified and more excited. Mary was a toddler now, running everywhere and talking in sentences that were half comprehensible and entirely adorable. Another child would fit right into their growing family. This pregnancy was easier than the first. Tessa was not as sick, and she knew what to expect. When the time came in early winter, the birth was quicker too. This time, Kade had a son. They named him Matthew, and he was the opposite of Mary in temperament. Where she had been quiet and calm, Matthew was loud from the moment he was born. But Kade loved him fiercely, this tiny boy who had his mother's dark hair and what promised to be a strong will. Tom and Jack were old hands at being big brothers now, helping with both Mary and Matthew. Tom, at 11, was nearly as tall as Tessa and was becoming a genuinely skilled horseman and ranch hand. Jack, at 9, was quieter and more thoughtful than his brother, but no less capable. The ranch continued to grow. Kade had paid off his debts from the drought and was even starting to save money. He bought more land, expanding the grazing area for his cattle. He and Tessa talked about the future, about what they wanted for their children. "I want them to have choices," Tessa said one night as they lay in bed, Matthew sleeping in a cradle nearby. "I want Tom and Jack to run this ranch if that is what they want, but I also want them to have education, to be able to do something else if they choose. And I want Mary to grow up knowing she can be more than just someone's wife, though there is nothing wrong with that if it is what she wants. We will give them that, Kade promised. Education, opportunities, whatever we can provide. True to their word, they hired a tutor from town to come out twice a week and work with all the children as they grew old enough. The one-room schoolhouse in Tucson was too far for a daily trip, but this arrangement worked well. Years passed in a rhythm of work and family life. Tom grew into a young man, strong and capable, with a natural way with horses that made him valuable not just on their ranch, but to neighbors who would pay him to break their horses. Jack discovered a talent for figures and started keeping the ranch books, tracking expenses and income with a precision that impressed both Kade and Tessa. Mary was bright and fearless, climbing everything and asking endless questions. Matthew was energetic and affectionate, always wanting to help with whatever his father or older brothers were doing. When Tom was 16, a neighboring rancher offered him a job that would pay more than Kade could afford. Tom came to Kade troubled, not sure what to do. "Do you want to take the job?" Kade asked. "I do not know. I like working here with you. This is home. But Mr. Carlson is offering good money and I could save it, maybe buy some land of my own someday." Kade put his hand on his son's shoulder. "Tom, you are a man now, capable of making your own decisions. If you want to take that job, you should. This ranch will always be here for you, and there will always be a place for you if you want to come back. But do not feel obligated to stay because of me. What about the work here? You need help. Jack is old enough to take on more now, and Matthew is growing fast. We will manage." Tom took the job, but he came home every Sunday for dinner and he stayed involved in the ranch operations. Kade was proud of his son's independence and work ethic. 2 years later, Tom came home with news. He had met a girl, the daughter of another rancher, and he wanted to marry her. Her name was Sarah, and when he brought her to meet the family, Kade and Tessa could see immediately that Tom had chosen well. Sarah was kind and hardworking, with a ready smile and a genuine interest in ranch life. They married that fall, and Tom built a small house on a portion of the Dawson land that Kade deeded to him as a wedding gift. It was strange to have Tom leave the main house, but also right. He was a man with his own life now, and Kade had to let him go while keeping him close. Jack, meanwhile, announced at 18 that he wanted to go to school to study business and accounting. He had been corresponding with a college in California and had been accepted. Tessa cried when he told them, proud and sad at the same time. "You have to go," Kade told him. "This is an amazing opportunity, but I feel like I am abandoning you all. You are not abandoning anyone. You are pursuing your education, which is exactly what your mother and I always wanted for you. We will miss you, but we will be here when you come home for visits." Jack left for California, and the house felt emptier without him. But he wrote letters regularly, full of enthusiasm for his studies and descriptions of city life that both fascinated and horrified his more rural family. Mary was 14 now, beautiful and smart, with boys in town starting to notice her. Kade found this development terrifying, much to Tessa's amusement. Matthew, at 12, was Kade's constant shadow, eager to learn everything about running a ranch. One evening, as Kade and Tessa sat on the porch watching the sunset, Mary doing her studies inside and Matthew feeding the horses, Tessa leaned her head on Kade's shoulder. "Can you believe how much things have changed?" "I think about it all the time," Kade admitted. "I remember the day you arrived, you and Tom and Jack in that wagon, all of you so thin and scared. And I remember thinking I was just helping someone in need. I had no idea I was finding my whole future." "I was terrified," Tessa said. Of you, of what might happen, of everything. But also desperate enough to take the chance. Best decision I ever made. Second best, Kade corrected. The best decision was saying yes when I asked you to marry me, Tessa laughed. That was an easy decision. I was already in love with you by then. Really, when did you know? When you stood up to Mrs. Fletcher. When you defended me and the boys without hesitation. That is when I knew you were not just kind but truly good. A man who would protect his own without caring what anyone thought. And when did you know you loved me? Kade asked. The night the foal was born. Standing in the barn with you, watching you be so gentle with that struggling mare, seeing how much you cared about helping her. And then later, when we kissed for the first time. I knew then that I wanted to spend my life with you. They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, watching their land turn golden in the fading light. This life they had built together, this family, it was everything Kade had never known he wanted. The years continued their march forward. Jack graduated from college and surprised everyone by coming home. He opened a small accounting office in Tucson, helping ranchers and businessmen with their finances. But he lived at the ranch, riding into town each day for work. Mary married at 19 to a young man who owned a small ranch near Tom's. Her wedding was a large affair, with half of Tucson in attendance. Kade walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes, remembering the little girl who used to follow him around the ranch asking questions about everything. Matthew, at 17, announced he wanted to join Tom in horse breeding. The two brothers formed a partnership, using land from both their portions of the original Dawson ranch. Kade watched his sons work together and felt a profound satisfaction. This was what he had hoped for, his children taking what he and Tessa had built and making it their own. Then Tessa got sick. It started as just tiredness, which they attributed to her age. She was 46 now, and life on a ranch was demanding, but the tiredness grew worse. She lost weight. The doctor from town could not figure out what was wrong. Kade was terrified in a way he had not been since the day Tessa went into labor with Mary. He could not lose her. She was the center of everything, the heart of their family and his life. For months, Tessa grew weaker. All the children came home, taking turns sitting with her, helping Kade care for her. Tom's wife Sarah took over the cooking and household management. Mary came every day to help. Jack put his business on hold. Matthew barely left his mother's side, but Tessa, even weak and sick, remained herself. She comforted her worried children, joked with her grandchildren, and held Kade's hand through the long nights. One evening, when they were alone, Tessa said quietly, "I need you to promise me something. Anything. If I do not get better, if this is my time, I need you to keep living. Not just existing like you were before I came, really living. You have so much more life to live." "You are going to be fine," Kade said, even though he was not sure he believed it. "Maybe. But if I am not, promise me, do not shut down. Our children need you. Our grandchildren need you." "I promise," Kade said, his voice breaking. "But you are not leaving me. We are growing old together, remember? That was the plan." Tessa smiled weakly. "I like that plan. Let's stick with it." And somehow, miraculously, she began to recover. It was slow, gradual, but the color came back to her cheeks and her appetite returned. The doctor said he had seen this before, mysterious illnesses that came and went. Whatever had been wrong, her body had fought it off. The whole family celebrated Thanksgiving that year with a profound gratitude that needed no words. Tessa was still weak, but she was alive, sitting at the head of the table with Kade beside her, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. Tom had 3 children now. Mary had 2. Jack was courting a girl from town and would likely marry soon. Matthew, at 19, was building his horse breeding business and making a name for himself throughout the territory. Looking around at all of them, Kade felt the weight of years and blessings. He was 52 now, weathered by sun and work but still strong. Tessa was 47, thinner than she had been but recovering. "I want to make a toast," Kade said, standing with his glass. "To family. To the people who walk through your door and change your life forever. To building something that lasts and passing it on to the next generation. And to second chances for all of us." They raised their glasses and Kade caught Tessa's eye. She was smiling at him with all the love and warmth she had shown that very first day when he agreed to take a chance on a desperate widow with 2 small boys. Life continued. Tessa regained her strength fully. Jack married his girl from town and they had a son. Matthew married a woman from a neighboring ranch and they built a house on what had become prime horse breeding land. Mary had another baby, and Tom announced his wife was expecting their 4th. Kade and Tessa, now grandparents many times over, settled into a slower pace of life. They left much of the ranch work to Matthew and hired hands, spending their time tending a large garden, hosting family dinners, and enjoying the fruits of their decades of labor. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Kade took Tessa into Tucson for a celebration dinner. The town had grown enormously, the railroad having arrived years before. It was barely recognizable from the dusty frontier outpost it had been when Tessa first arrived. "You remember our wedding day?" Kade asked over dinner. "Of course. It was small and simple and perfect. Just us and the boys and the preacher." Mrs. Fletcher was scandalized, Kade reminded her, and they both laughed. Mrs. Fletcher was scandalized by everything. Whatever happened to her? She moved to California with her daughter a few years back. Apparently the Arizona heat did not agree with her anymore. "Good riddance," Tessa said, uncharacteristically uncharitable. They both laughed again, walking back to the wagon after dinner, passing storefronts lit by electric lights now. Kade said, "I have been thinking." "About what?" "About that day you arrived. How you looked so desperate and scared, and those 2 little boys in the back of that wagon. I was so lonely then. I did not even know how lonely until suddenly I was not." "I have been thinking about that day too," Tessa admitted. "How close I came to not stopping. I almost drove past your ranch. I thought you would say no, that nobody would want to take on a widow and 2 children, but something told me to try. I am glad you listened to that something. Me too." They stood by the wagon, holding hands under the Arizona stars, 2 people who had found each other in desperation and built a life beyond anything either could have imagined. Years continued to pass. They buried friends, welcomed more grandchildren, and eventually great-grandchildren. The ranch land was divided among the children according to their wishes, with portions for Tom and Matthew who wanted to continue ranching, and money from the sale of some land for Jack and Mary, who had made their lives in other ways. Kade and Tessa moved into a smaller house that Matthew built for them near his own, comfortable and manageable. They spent their days reading, gardening, and being visited constantly by their enormous extended family. On Kade's 70th birthday, the whole family gathered for a celebration. There were so many people that the party had to be held outside, tables stretching across the yard. Kade looked at the sea of faces, at children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, at the family that had grown from one lonely cowboy and one desperate widow with 2 small boys. Tom, now 44 and graying at the temples, stood to make a speech. "Pa, I was 7 years old when Ma brought us to your ranch. I remember being so scared. We had been rejected from so many places, told that nobody wanted a woman with children, but you took us in. You gave us a home, but more than that, you gave us a father. You taught me everything I know about ranching, about honor, about being a man. Because of you, all of this exists." He gestured at the assembled family. Thank you for taking a chance on 3 strangers who showed up on your property all those years ago." There was not a dry eye in the crowd, including Kade's. He stood, his knees protesting but his heart full, and looked at his family. "I was the lucky one," he said simply. "I did not know I was lonely until I was not. Your mother and you boys, you saved me as much as I helped you. This family, everything we have built, it is because we all took a chance on each other. That is what love is, taking a chance and building something together." The party continued into the evening, with music and dancing and laughter. Kade and Tessa sat in chairs of honor, watching their legacy unfold before them. Grandchildren ran and played. Adult children mingled and told stories. Great-grandchildren toddled around under watchful eyes. "We did good," Tessa said quietly, leaning against Kade's shoulder. "We did very good," Kade agreed. As the sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple just as it had that first day Tessa arrived, Kade felt a peace settle over him. This life, this family, this love, it was everything. It was more than he had ever dreamed possible when he was a lonely cowboy working a struggling ranch by himself. A lonesome cowboy had become the father 2 small boys needed, but in the process, he had also become so much more. A husband to a remarkable woman, a father to 6 children counting Tom and Jack, and the ones he shared with Tessa, a grandfather and great-grandfather to more people than he could easily count. The ranch house stood solid against the evening sky, lights glowing in the windows, filled with the sounds of family. The land stretched out in all directions, divided now among his children but still the Dawson legacy. Cattle grazed in the distance. Horses ran in the pastures that Matthew had built his breeding program on. The vegetable garden that had started as a small plot behind the original house had grown into a substantial operation that Mary's daughter-in-law now managed, selling produce in town. Everything had grown, everything had flourished, because one day a widow arrived with 2 small sons, and a lonesome cowboy became the father they needed. And in becoming what they needed, he had found what he needed too. Years later, when Kade was 81 and Tessa was 76, they passed away within 6 months of each other, having lived long and full lives surrounded by family. They were buried on a hill overlooking the original ranch house, which had been preserved as a family landmark. At their memorial service, Tom, now in his 70s himself, told the story one more time to his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The story of how his mother had arrived at a dusty ranch with 2 scared little boys, how a kind cowboy had taken them in, and how that simple act of compassion had grown into a family dynasty that now included over 50 people. "That is the legacy they left us," Tom said, his voice strong despite his age. "Not just land or money, though they left us that too. They left us the understanding that family is not always about blood. Sometimes family is who you choose. Sometimes family is built from nothing but hope and hard work and love. And sometimes the greatest thing you can do is take a chance on someone who needs help, because you never know what might grow from that one small act of kindness." The family gathered on that hill, multiple generations bearing the Dawson name or connected to it through marriage, was proof of that truth. From one lonesome cowboy and one desperate widow with 2 small sons, all of this had grown. Proof that love can build empires, that kindness echoes through generations, and that sometimes the family you need finds you exactly when you need them most.